how basically Brazilians solve payments. They have this system called Pix that it's a QR code based system.
I think one of the things that is really different about this industry is the fact that there are these perverse incentives with tokens. And the moment that somebody wants to ship something and take it to market, oftentimes advocating for your network versus like the value add that it brings to the consumer.
What do you think that is the most relevant sub-industry in crypto that needs to focus in this part of the experience, like creating great bundles for users? Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Frontera, the podcast where we analyze frontier markets and frontier technology. I'm Ab, co-founder and CEO of Bando, with my great friend Kush, who's the founder of Odyssey Labs. Kush, how's everything, my friend? Where are you right now? You've been traveling. Now where you are at?
Yeah. Now I'm home. So I'm just here for some time, taking it easy, and locking in for a few weeks before all the craziness for Dev Connects, which I'm very much so looking forward to.
Yeah, it's gonna be a couple crazy weeks. And what do you do when you're home? Like, are you a social person, or you're like someone in the
Hermit.
mountain living alone? Yeah.
No. I have like I very quickly get back into my rhythms, my gym, my coffee shops, places I'd like to go to. So and then I also have a lot of friends here who I, don't get to see as often as I would like. So I generally like spend a lot of time with them, whilst also like balancing. But it's always funny when I don't know, it's you go and you travel and then you come back home and then you're like, oh my gosh, so much has changed in me, and this place is exactly the same. Especially because I live in a very, very old town that is, hundreds and hundreds of years old. So it's always a very stark difference, of living in this very kind of frontier tech world, and then you come back home and it's all old and the same.
Yeah. And you think that maybe the business that has been for the longest in the town is maybe a restaurant
Yeah,
that has a
exactly.
bunch of Lindy.
Yeah. It's like they sell, I don't know, like paper or something, and that's the oldest town, so it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Yeah, man. I think that I'm gonna be traveling also to Argentina, maybe Brazil, a couple days before when I need to sort that out. And today it's a really special episode because we are going to analyze a couple of the most recent essays that we've published in Frontera. As you know, we write the best essays about frontier markets. And today I want to start talking about this mental model that we created, that it's the pyramid of adoption. We thought about this after we recorded our episode with Thomas, that he's the CEO of BRL1, that's the stablecoin of the Brazilian real. And while talking to him, we realized how basically Brazilians solve payments. They have this system called Pix, that it's a QR code based system that you can have like a Stripe invoice, but via QR. And the government created it to make it really widely adopted. So there are not a lot of KYC requirements to do the transfers. If you are banked, they assume that the banking partners are the ones running KYCs, and that got us thinking, because this system has been widely adopted in Brazil. It's the fastest growing payment method in the region, and we created this analysis just to make a quick a couple of facts. In 2023, the number of picks made in Q3, no, in Q1 2023 were 8.1 billion. That's the double as the next payment method, that is a credit card with 4.2 billion and debit card 3.8 billion. So this is how fast this payment method has been implemented in Brazil. This looks like a chart up and to the right. And that got us thinking about this pyramid, that sometimes in crypto we launch new L2s, new blockchains, new L1s. So we're thinking at a network level. And what we believe is that we should be thinking at an experience level before thinking of a network or an asset. If we crack the experience, the asset and the network should follow. But I think that in crypto, as being like a deep tech industry, for a long time we've thought about this the other way around. First the asset or the network, and then the experience. Kush, based on your experience, why do you think that this has happened, and how has this impacted like frontier markets?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is really different about this industry is the fact that there are these perverse incentives with tokens. And the moment that somebody wants to ship something and take it to market, oftentimes advocating for your network versus like the value add that it brings to the consumer comes as a priority, right? And so right now, for example, we're seeing all these tokens launch, all these new L1s launch, all these new um, networks launch, right? That sit at the very top of the pyramid. When in reality, and specifically for your user, things should feel like magic. And crypto's sort of gone the other way around. When it's tried to sell the idea of some sort of infrastructure versus how that actually implements a better experience for your user at the end of the day, right? So I think unfortunately we sort of got it the other way around to crypto's detriment. There's been, obviously an enormous amount of wealth creation that has come as a consequence of that. Unfortunately, at an expense likely for retail investors, right? So that's why I do feel like there is this, and I've been thinking a lot about like what does it actually mean to have crypto, right? And to have this technology for us, because I feel like there is so much um, misguided incentives, unfortunately, in this industry that don't I mean, you feel sometimes know as somebody who's trying to deliver a really great experience for users. That's Bando's whole thesis, is how do we make a great experience available for our users? Don't you sometimes feel like sort of the other way around often when you think about what it means to actually build a startup in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So lately we've been thinking a lot about that, because today I think that we're in a moment in the industry where the experience is gonna start being most of the differentiator. And what do I mean about this? There's this precept. I don't remember if this was coined by Mark Andreessen, or who's the BC guy from A16C Crypto.
You've got, well, Mark and Ben, who are the founders, and then read, write, own Chris Dixon.
Chris Dixon, that's the guy. I think that this is a mental model from Chris Dixon, that he says that technology industries go through different phases. Ones where it's like an unbundling phase, and then it's a bundling phase. And I think that in crypto, we've been through an unbundling phase for a long time. And what does this mean? We have Morpho, we have Aave, we have tens of different lending money market protocols. We have Uniswap, we have Sushi, we have 1inch, we have tons of decks. And then these things like LeFi start emerging, where they are bundlers of a specific sub industry that's interoperability and liquidity. And the next phase is building front end bundles. For me, it's really clear and it's really obvious that there's going to be a retail app that bundles Uniswap, Aave, it's non custodial, you can run bonds. And when you do that, basically, the main thing that you need to focus is how do you get users, and how do you differentiate your experience. And what's a differentiated experience? A simple experience. And we just need to remember the history of technology. Apple was not the first company launching a touch screen in a mobile phone, but they were the first ones to run it like in a really simple, elegant way. So I think that the next phase of the crypto industry, it's been going through the pyramid, but from the bottom up instead from top down. And in the past, I think that top down was because first you need to build the network, the technology. But now that we have it, it's time to build the experience. And based on what you've seen in different regions and industries, what do you think that it's the most relevant sub industry in crypto that needs to focus in this part of the experience, like creating great bundles for users?
Yeah, I mean, I think we think about this often, right? When we're building products, and I'm just thinking about like I mean, we're going to do a whole deep dive on Nubank very recently, but I think products that win are the ones that get a lot of distribution. I feel like that's, it's the saying. It's like first time founders focus on products, second time founders focus on distribution. And I think that that's really where essentially that saying implies that well-rounded founders think about how do I get this into as many hands as possible. I do think that there's also this other interesting play in crypto specifically, which is the experience can be great for institutions and retail simultaneously, right? And so for retail, for example, performing a swap on Uniswap is great, right? Because you can, exchange whilst having relatively cheap sort of fees across different esoteric assets. But I think the same is still applicable to like traditional institutions and corporations and governments, in the sense that for you to say transfer like a deed title from one person to another in a traditional system today may take months, if not years. Whereas now the experience can be seamlessly transferred through some sort of NFT, for example, right? So I think this is obviously most applicable to things like DeFi and everything built on top of DeFi. And it's funny because I feel outside of emerging markets, people don't see a ton of utility for DeFi, but here it's so obvious. Even now, I feel like lending, for example, and depositing assets into Aave, for example, just to generate some sort of yield. Like I was seeing recently that now users of Coinbase in Canada can earn a yield, of 5% basically through their Coinbase accounts, which actually is hard to get that level of yield in a bank account in, even developed economies, let alone in frontier markets, right? So that's what I'm super bullish on. DeFi, I mean, there's like a lot of subsectors we can double click on within DeFi specifically, but that's how I'm seeing it. And like speaking of networks and assets, because again, this is what I love about these sort of conversations, because you guys think a lot about like how do you package crypto for retail. To what extent do you think your current user base of Bundle, for example, cares about the network that they operate on?
I think that our current user base, hmm, that's a tough one because, for example, we have this client that they have 10 million users in Africa, and those users don't care. This client MiniPay runs on Celo, and when we interview them, sometimes we've asked like, "What do you think of Celo?" And they say, "What is Celo?" Like they literally don't care. They want access to dollars, and I think that that's the right approach. When if a user cares about the network, maybe that's either someone that has already been onboarded or someone that's kind of dogmatic. And the reality of broad adoption is that neither these two demographics will bring like millions of users in. Most users just want to manage and to solve their problems. And that's the reality. And I think that this seems like pretty obvious. And I think that this brings me to the essay that we're posting today. That essay, I'm a big fan of Dune. I'm a big fan of books, basically. And Dune is one of those books. Dune One is one of those books that I'd love to read again. Like, just forget everything about it and reread it, just to feel again its novelty. But right now, I'm reading the third part of Dune. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but Dune has like these really poetic phrases that I just love. And in one moment, this really cool character says how simple things were when our Messiah was only a dream, because they're reflecting on all of those times that they were basically wandering in the desert trying to get water, and afterwards like the Messiah is now a reality and things are super different, and making decisions is super hard because now they have more resources. And you and I were talking about that. When I read this, I sent that quote to Joker to create the essay, and I said I feel a little like that, because how simple things were when like massive crypto adoption was only a dream, and now we are in the brink of it, and we need to deliver. And in frontier markets, we need to deliver. And I don't know what you feel, but I feel that we still have a ton of chances, and a ton of chances in the sense that we have a ton of opportunities that we haven't solved as frontier market builders. I'm really bullish on the region, but I'm really critical about the quality of builders that we have here. We see
Yeah.
it versus people in the US, and I think that there's a big gap. So how simple things were when Latin America crypto adoption was only a dream. Now we need to deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like arbitrages exists in the frontier for a reason, right? It's like when you think about, people trying to find the new world, it was a very treacherous mission. You had to essentially venture out into this vast unknown to some extent, right? And there's obviously a lot of like nefarious history there and so forth, but the premise is that it's still like really challenging and a really complex mission for you to go out and say, I want to find what's new and I want to be able to address these big problems. But I fully agree with you, man. Like we've talked a lot about talent and how hard it is to actually find ace ultra high quality talent. And that's really what it is. I think it's also about recruitment. Steve Jobs, there's this great podcast, Founders, right? And I'm sure a lot of the audience here has heard it. I know you listen to it. But the episode on Steve Jobs talks about, as a founder, you should spend 50% of your time recruiting. And this is like where I've been shifting a lot of my energy towards recently, is trying to find those ace people who are up for closing that arbitrage, because the arbitrage exists there for a reason, and it's not easy. It's really, really, really hard. It's not a easy feat, but I do think there's asymmetric returns there, right? That are very obvious to me.
Yeah. And regarding this essay of the Messiah, right? Uh, when did you first join and started delivering a lot of energy to crypto?
I think for me, so 2013 was the first time I came across Bitcoin, and that was like fascinating. But I would say 2017 is when I re-engaged meaningfully.
Yeah.
I think around the same time as you, right?
Yeah. And I remember I really love this idea of the Messiah because we were thinking of a decentralized system. We were thinking about the future of finance. We were thinking about the future of money. And that seemed really far away. And part of the Messiah was institutional adoption. I remember that in the bull market of 2018, the whole thing was institutions are coming, and they didn't came until basically 2024, maybe. That's the first institution might be MicroStrategy, but today we're here. Yesterday we saw Polymarket raising $2 billion at a $9 billion valuation, invested by ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange. I mean, we cannot get any more institutional. So the Messiah is a reality now, and
Shane
that comes with a
Copeland,
lot
his
of
name.
problems. Yeah, he's Shane Muad'Dib.
Exactly.
So I mean, it's just crazy to think that. And in the lore of the Messiah and the dream, um, when it gets kind of cold, when the Messiah starts ruling, like it becomes its own enemy. And I think that that might happen. Like we were promised a decentralized future, and we got a tokenized dollar. So I don't know. It's just a philosophical talk that I love to have, because I think that out of philosophy came most of my deepest realizations in my life, and I just want to keep thinking about it, because what should we be building, like the dream or the reality? Today, I don't know if I'm a little bit more jaded, but definitely a reality, a real business with billions of dollars in revenue. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I mean, I feel like the truth, and philosophy also teaches this, right? Is it's rarely binary, and it rather exists in between two states, right? It's like the universe is not black or white. It's this infinite set of combinations between the two things. And so to feel, because I oftentimes resonate with what you're saying around, should we build, this anarchist cypherpunk world, or should we lean in heavily into the institutional like adoption and so on? And actually, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think it's what it is about creating new institutions, essentially. That because I do think humans, like, we need some sort of governance around us that enables us to be like this meta structure of organization, while still trying to reimagine and reinstantiate like new values in society. And so that's why I love the network state movement, right? I think we should have Balaji on at some point to come talk about like why he's so excited about the frontier, because I think that that's like, and Balaji in fact talks about dark talent, right? And when he talks about dark talent, is this undiscovered talent that exists in the frontiers of the world. And I think that's what a lot of this mission of Frontera is about, is let's talk about dark talent and let's expose it to the rest of the world. So yeah, that's the way, and I do feel like network states are kind of the answer that tread both lines for me.
I love the idea of network states, and I think that, well, I need to get deeper into network states because these are one of those things that only the time will tell if it'll be a crypto bourgeois thing or a reality, right? Because what I mean is that it sounds like a great idea when you're writing a book about it. And obviously, Balaji is like a genius. And I absolutely admire and respect Balaji. Just thinking of like from my background in building from a frontier market, hard to tell. But I really like this approach of implementing some of the network state elements that is sovereign money. Definitely, that's a critical part of it, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably like the weakest link for the network state movement, is transition it beyond like the bourgeois space. But I think also if you study a lot of big revolutions, that's to some extent where they began, right? It's kind of the intellectual class that had the free time to pontificate on the values of freedom and liberty and
Yeah.
egalitarianism, right? Versus like the kind of wageless land workers. And so I think if you find yourself in any position of privilege, I think generally you have this like moral duty to propagate these values like far and wide. So I don't know. I'm excited about network states. I think they're one of the top 3 most important like innovations in mankind. And long,
Ever?
currently, I would say, yeah.
Okay. So you'd say AI, crypto, and network states, or what's the thing?
Yes.
What's
Yeah.
the?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I need to
What do you
get
think?
deeper. Well, I really love genetics because I mean that's her path to living longer and understanding things like karma and I don't know. Yeah, basically karma. We can have in our genes is a lot of our predefinitions and what will be out of our lives. I think I don't know. So yeah, dude, I think that we need to keep this. We should do I don't know like a mate thing in Dev Connect or a philosophical debate or something like that
I was gonna
because
say we can pivot Frontera to like a philosophy podcast or something.
yeah, dude, I feel so underprepared for something like that. But I think that that's when you should start something. When I started Espacio Crypto, I was a stupid baby crypto boy, you know?
Yeah, it's like the best. It's the best way to get your questions like validated, right, or answered in the universe, is just like putting it out there and like with somebody else or with a group of people like chiseling away at the idea, right?
You know, there's this mental model that says that the best way to get to the right answer of something is posting in social media the wrong answer.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the crowd will make the reality. Man, thank you for another great pod. Next week we'll analyze some news. We'll write this. We'll have a surprise about Nubank and crypto. We're cooking that. It'll come out in a couple of weeks. Live Frontera in Buenos Aires in 1 month, November. So yeah, thank you, man. Great to chat with you, and see you next time.
Always a pleasure.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.